Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Voices in the Game. As you can see, it's a little different as we have our first ever in person interview of Voices in the Game. And I am so happy we are doing it with our guest here on today's episode. He has been the voice of Duquesne football for over 30 years. He is my good friend, Mr. Alex Panormios. Alex, how you doing, my friend? Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure. I've been watching your earlier episodes. You do a great job, and yeah, I'm honored to have you here. Pop into the old Panormios abode and talk a little bit about broadcasting, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much,
sure,
Alex,
absolutely.
for joining us here. And for all of our listeners out there, we want to thank you all for tuning in to Voices in the Game. Make sure to like and follow us wherever you listen to Voices in the Game, whether it is on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. So, Alex, I would love to get the party started.
Okay.
So, when did you first started to gain interest into wanting to be a sportscaster?
Well, I always wanted to do radio, but the early part, I wasn't really thinking sports. I thought, well, I'd do radio, go in. I got a job at a little station out in Canonsburg called WARO, and it was just a little 500-watt station, and so I became a DJ there, and I did sales, and people always tell you, if you want to do radio, they're going to try to get you to do sales because they need salesmen. And a guy named a gentleman that used to work at WDVE told me, he goes, listen, if you want to do radio, don't let them put you into sales because they'll keep you there. So stick to radio. So I did sales originally to get my foot in the door. But then after that, I started doing some DJing overnight and so forth. And so I got into the game. I learned how things work at the radio station. And then after that, one night, my boss there said, hey, listen, we're going to do a high school football game. Do you want to go along and keep stats for them? I'm like, sure, why not? I thought it'd be fun, So we went out to a game in the South Hills. I think it was Bethel Park, and they were playing somebody. And I did stats that night, and the guy don't play by play. His name was Jeff Friend. And so I was sitting there doing stats going, and this looks like a lot of fun. So, I got bitten by the bug of broadcasting. And so after that couple games with Bob Friend and another color analyst, I thought, this is something I really want to do. So I was at WAR for a while. And after that, I moved to a different station, and that's where things began. So, but that's where I got my foot in the door. It's just a little radio station and doing stats, and then you get the bug like you've gotten over the years, and you're like, okay, let's do it.
What was it like for you first breaking into the industry, Alex, when you decided that you did want to try to pursue play-by-play broadcasting?
Well, when I went to WPIT, that was my next step. And I was a DJ there, did overnights, who worked two jobs. A lot of times, and a lot of people know probably out there that do radio, sometimes you just can't do one job. Sometimes you have to do two jobs or three jobs. And for many of my years when I was, developing all these different things that I've done, it's been under multiple jobs. So I worked at a sporting goods store, Ross Park. I ran that in the day, and at night I DJed. Well, after so many years doing that, like a year or so, I thought, well, you know what? I think I'd like to do football. So the radio station had an AM. It was 73 WPIT. So I approached the station manager, who was an older gentleman, said, hey, listen, I'd like to buy time on the station and do North Hills football. And he thought about it. He thought, well, you know what? That's not a bad idea. So the station actually bought me equipment. They got me the headsets, everything, and they said, okay, here you go. And they charged me a minimal price. So again, I had to go back out and sell. But, when you want to do something like that, you do whatever it takes. So I went out, I sold all the advertising. I got all my own help, got my color analyst. I got a sideline reporter. People that were with me for years. We did North Hills football for about 18, 19 years and had some great experiences. But that's how I started. You go out and you sell your advertisers, and then I had to get the equipment. And at that time, things are different now. Back in those days, you had to have a regular phone line. It's called a POTS line, Plano telephone system line. So I had to install telephone lines everywhere we went, whether it's Butler or, any school you went to, you had to buy a phone line. So there are plenty of times, though, when the phone lines weren't attached, and I could tell stories about this, where the gentleman who did my color, his name was Rick Smith, and he worked for a phone company. So if we didn't have a phone line installed, he'd run a wire outside. We did this at Woodland Hills, and he would connect to a payphone, and we would broadcast over a payphone because that's the only way we could get a signal out. So there were a lot of times where you had to make do with what you had. And so that was crazy.
So,
Always stories.
so how was he able to connect it to the payphone if you know?
You know what? He was a very smart guy, and he goes, Alex, we don't have a line in here. And this is when Deuce was around. Remember, I don't know if you remember Deuce Kersinski, but he was in the booth, goes, oh, there's a phone line out there. So Rick would always carry extra phone line. He was always prepared. So we get to the stadium, he'd run the phone line out, he'd attach it, screw it in. We got dial tone, so we broadcast. So it's been done many ways, and I've done it over cell phone. And now we have, of course, the Wi-Fi, which is awesome, and it makes it studio quality. But back in that time, that's what you had to do. Back in the olden days.
What were and you did go to North Hills, Alex.
Yes,
so
I did.
what were
Yeah.
some of your favorite memories when you did call North Hills football for them?
Got to see LeVar Arrington play. Got to make up a call. We called him Marv LeVar. And one thing he did in the pros, and I got to watch this, and it was an honor to see this guy play, is the LeVar leap. And what he would do is he would line up right over center. And as soon as the quarterback would take the snap, he'd go back and he'd leap over before the quarterback could go back in the pocket and tackle him. That was amazing to see that. The state championship game where they won in '93 over Central Bucks West was a highlight. And Eric Kasparovich, who was a friend of mine, who now is coach out at Mars, but of course, great success at Pine Richland, and worked for me in the sporting goods store for a while. And that's when I was planning all this radio stuff. So Eric was right with me in the beginning when I began this. And we would often sit there and talk about what we could do. But it was a friend, and he became a good friend. And some of these guys did. But just to go back to your alma mater and broadcast, they had a dynasty back in that time. Back in the late '80s, they were a national championship team, and so I was honored to go and broadcast a lot of those games. And the first game we broadcast was the Buddy LaRosa Football Classic. That was in 1989 up in Cincinnati, Ohio. We had the Bender brothers that were great on those teams. But, just over the years, there's so many good memories, so many dynasties, so many good players coming out of there. Of course, Ryan Lehmeyer, who played in North Hills, now coach at Central Catholic, got to see him play his high school ball. So, a lot of good kids came out of North Hills, and the experience that I got there over the years. And like I said, we've done that, myself and Rick Smith and a gentleman named Al Gehring. Greg McAtee was in the studio running the boards. Ryan Gavatorta had a whole crew. Ryan Gavatorta now, SID over at Robert Morris. And so it's funny how everybody in Pittsburgh is a few degrees of each other. Like I know him. But so we put it all together. We did that for a number of years, which really launched what we have now.
And like you mentioned, Alex, with you working at the sporting goods store while trying to build your career in radio, what was that grind like for you? Because I would imagine it consisted of a lot of nights where you didn't sleep.
Yes, many nights, Colt, where I didn't sleep. I would, work all night at the station and come home, and retail stores open at 10, so I'd come home, and sometimes my wife needed a ride into town to work at her job, Mimi, who put up with a lot of crap, by the way, over the years. But man, you just didn't get a lot of sleep. When we get into talking about travel and about Duquesne football, when I first started doing, well, we'll get into that whenever you want, but sleep was at a premium. And so you had to really, whenever you could, whether it was going back to the John and taking your break and maybe taking a half-hour snooze, you got your sleep wherever you could, and then you woke up and you did it all over again. So those weren't even the craziest times. That was during the week, but weekends were crazy with football.
And you also started your own high school sports network, which was called the Nauticom Sports Network. So what was the inspiration to start it, and was that affiliated with when you did North Hills football?
Well, Scholastic Sports Network was the first network. And what we did with Scholastic Sports Network is we got 3 stations. And not only were they on radio, but that is when I first started streaming out of my basement here, literally here. And we were the only ones streaming at that time. We streamed games on KQV. That was our game of the week. We did North Hills on WPIT. And then we picked another game that was out south, whether it was Bethel Park or whoever. And we did that game on WARO, which was the station I worked at in Canonsburg. So I purchased time off all those stations. And then, we had Greg back in the studio, and he would host a halftime show and a pregame show. And that's how we did it. And I had the streaming going on here. So it was kind of new to me. I learned about it, how to do it, set up a computer. I did use Nauticom at that time, but only for their servers. They provided me with the bandwidth to actually do the games, but the actual hardware that I used to stream was here. But they provided bandwidth back at their offices out in Gibsonia. But that's how the internet streaming started, and it was first off with North Hills football, and then the games of the week, and that's how things ramped up. Yeah, so it was really cool. And then that, a couple of years later, Nauticom was really happy with what I was doing, and they said, "Hey, you want to come in and talk?" I said, "Sure, let's talk. Let's see what you want to do." And they brought me in, and that's how we began there.
And how did you go about picking the game of the week?
Well, it was always, the top game. Back in that time, heck, it could have been Upper St. Clair. You know, we just wanted to pick Pittsburgh, pick the most well-known game, whether it's North Hills NA, Upper St. Clair was a dynasty. Mount Lebanon played great football. Generally, it was a quad A game. Sometimes we did triple A games and went on to TJ or, with Chirpec out there or wherever. But we just really, there wasn't any crazy, method to it. It was just seeing what game was out there and what game was the best.
And what was it like for you, Alex, growing the network? And how does it feel knowing that it is still around? It's known today as the Trib Live High School Sports Network.
That's crazy. And Don's done a good job out there. Don Rebel has been out there with me from the beginning doing that stuff. He came along actually at the tail end of Scholastic Sports Network and started doing some studio work for us. And, I met Don a long time ago before, when I was just getting underway. I went to a company first called USA On Ramp, and they were a Pittsburgh internet provider. I was going to try to get them to stream, and they never responded. So I'm like, oh. So then I went to Nauticom, and that's when they responded, and that's how it began. And then I brought Dawn in there, and that's how the whole thing kind of started out, outside of the internet here. But Nauticom was the big shaboom that went national. We started streaming games in Texas and Florida, streaming games, I think, Ohio, just different parts of the country because they wanted to expand. So it got crazy after that.
Yeah. And I believe that you also had a chance to broadcast other sports, not just football.
Sure, yeah. We did Dapper Dan Wrestling Classic for years down at Fitzgerald Fieldhouse. And that's something where I know the Nellises from Shaler and got together with them once, and they said, yeah, you want to do the Dapper Dan Wrestling Classic? And at that point, it wasn't on TV. It wasn't on anything. So the only way people could listen to it was just through the internet. We used to take hits from all over the world, again, streaming from my basement here. And it was amazing to see, some of the strange games. I think we did a high school game when I had, that's something else we can talk about down the road. Red Zone Media, where we streamed a game from the Arctic Circle with one of the teams that was up in the Arctic, and one of my crew that did broadcast out in the eastern portion of Pennsylvania went up to the Arctic Circle and broadcast the game from the Arctic with a satellite phone, which is crazy too. So we've done it all. We've been everywhere. But anyway, that's how it began, yeah.
What game was it? What sport was it in the Arctic Circle?
It was football.
It was football in the Arctic Circle.
And it was a big deal. And it was the first time they broadcast a football game up there. And they got it streamed online. It was. I think I have an archive of it. I have to go back and listen, but it was amazing. They went all the way up to broadcast. I think it was up way up north outside of Nome. It was maybe not Arctic. It was Alaska, but up north. And I'd have to look back and see the city they were in. It was pretty amazing.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm sitting there going, these guys are up way up north. Man, it's incredible what the internet brought to broadcasting. It really is.
Yeah, that was actually one of the things I wanted to talk about, Alex, because when you were doing all this, it seemed like it was so revolutionary knowing that the internet was still in its first stages of existence.
Yeah, it was. It was really cool, and I was proud to be a part of that. And, we got to work with USA Hockey for a while, and actually we did the first interview with Sidney Crosby. It was from that room right in there, and I had a gentleman who just got a hold of him after the draft, and he interviewed him because he was doing his show through Red Zone Media. So we had Sid Crosby, one of the first interviews right in there. And that was cool too. So we've done things with a lot of teams. Temple, I've streamed for Temple. We've streamed again for USA Hockey, all the PSAC. We streamed PSAC's goals, just a lot. So, we've had a lot of experiences with a lot of different sports too. Streamed a lot of minor league baseball through there. And So yeah, just it's all there's so much history that it's hard to remember. Sometimes to keep it in order, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
It really did. It really does seem like that. A lot of that history, like you mentioned, was right here in your basement. And
Yeah.
was that the same when you began Red Zone Media as
Yes.
well?
Red Zone Media in the garage. I had about 15 computers in there, 15 servers, and had to have 15 telephone lines put in. And so we had the Bell telephone guys would come in all the time, and they'd have to hook up these lines. And they'd come in and see all these computers down, and they'd see all the wires and telephones. They're like, "What are you doing in here?" I said, "Well, we're going to stream sports." They're like, they wanted to know if it was like a casino site I was running or like some kind of strange website. I'm no, it's all sports. But yeah, we had everything installed in there and have backup and battery backup. But it's kind of neat because you hear all these big companies that start in the garage, and that's where it started. The whole thing started in my garage, and I was kind of proud about the fact to be able to bring it here and run it for many years. Kind of cool.
And did your wife Mimi help out with anything?
She had
there?
to sometimes. There's absolutely, because a lot of times on Friday night when I'd be going out to broadcast high school football, we'd have a number of games going on here. Now I had my brother John would come in and be a technician. My brother Steven would come in and be a technician. On certain occasions, my wife Mimi would have to come down and be a technician, make sure everybody got connected. All the games were broadcasting, everything was streaming and testing it and listening. So I had a lot of help.
Yeah, and like you mentioned before, Alex, with your time broadcasting high school football, there really is such a rich history of high school football here in Southwestern PA. So, how does it feel for you knowing that you got to be a part of it?
It was great. When I did North Hills football, they weren't consistently on the air. I don't think they had a real presence, but I thought, well, it'd be a great place to start. What better place to go and learn is at your high school. And again, they were a great team. It was not hard to go out and sell advertising because everybody, the community supported them 100%. So just going out and be able to do that, and I had so many people that would listen to those games because they couldn't all make it to the games, and WPIT put out a decent signal in the North Hills and most of Allegheny County, so we had like the perfect situation. People knew to call in. We would get shout outs from the Rowdy Rooters who were up on the hill. I don't know if you've ever been to North Hills Monterelli Stadium, but everybody there kind of embraced it, and we embraced it. And we loved doing it, and again got to call those state championship games and those great games with North Allegheny. And then once we started doing Scholastic Sports Network, we started doing the games of the week. And I remember doing a game out in Hershey, Pennsylvania. It was Pine Richland was playing out there, and it was just an overtime game. It was a great game. Pine Richland came out with the win. Remember coming home in a snowstorm from Hershey, Pennsylvania, and about a foot of snow following some people home. So one other thing that I did during my tenure broadcasting football is I would deliver Post-Gazettes overnight. So when I'd get home from traveling all night, back from Hershey or back from Duquesne, wherever, I'd have to throw newspapers for a couple of hours in the night too. So I did everything.
My goodness, Alex. How in the world? Yeah, I know I asked this earlier, but how in the world did you find time to sleep?
I don't know. Some of those days where I'd go to a Duquesne game, well, I'd do, okay, this would be a day, and this was when I was going crazy, and this is what people don't understand. They go, it's easy. Oh, he lucked out. No, there's a lot of work to it. I would work at a law firm in the day. I would come home, grab my stuff, run out to a high school game. After that, sometimes had to drive to New York for Duquesne. So we do a high school game, went to Monticello's, did the post-game show till midnight, jumped in the car, drove to St. Peter's in New Jersey, went to Iona in New York, wherever we would go, drive all night on Interstate 80, smelling skunk all the way across the interstate, get to the field, set up, broadcast. After the game was over at 4 o'clock, jump up in the car, drive home. Driving home across Interstate 80, getting home, jumping in the car, driving to the Post-Gazette Depot, throwing papers, finally getting done about 6 in the morning, coming home and crashing. So it was crazy.
That is an understatement, Alex, with it sounding crazy, but absolutely phenomenal as well. Absolutely unbelievable.
I don't know how I did it back in those days, but it was it's what you had to do. What you're doing and what I did, you kind of made things happen for yourself, and that's what you're doing here with the show and all the different places you're going and broadcasting. You're showing initiative. You're getting out there doing things, and that's important. That's how you make things happen.
That is 1000% true for anybody
Sure.
watching and listening out there. And you had a chance to expand on broadcasting with lacrosse as well at the
Yes.
Civic Arena with the Pittsburgh Crossfire in 2000.
Yeah.
So, what were some of your favorite memories getting a chance to broadcast Crossfire games in the one season you were with them?
Well, that's when we went into the Nauticom Sports Network, and when Dawn came, and that's when we were doing high school sports. And boy, doing that was great because it was new in town, and you know, people were excited about the idea of having a lacrosse team in Pittsburgh, and you know, the team was led by probably the greatest player in lacrosse, Gary Gate, and his brother, and they came in town and they were the captains. And you know, for the first year, it did really well, but for whatever reason, after the first year, they just decided to fold up and they left Pittsburgh. But it was an experience. Got to broadcast at the Civic Arena and got to sit up where Mike Lang would sit. And boy, the vantage point up there, I don't know, Colton, if you were ever up there, that is away from the ice. I mean, that is a long haul up to the top. But it was just a lot of fun because it was a fun game. You know, it was only did it for a year, but it was just a pleasure to be able to do that, you know.
Yeah, what was the press box like at Civic Arena? Because I went to a few Penguin games as a fan, but I never had a chance to actually go up to the press box where it was.
Well, the press box, a lot of stairs going up and a lot of suites as you go up, and like the president's suite or whoever, and then you get up to the top, and it was all open air. So you'd come up, and it was just like a counter, and the chairs there were, Mike Lang would sit and would take his notes and everything, and you were looking out over it, just directly drop off to see the ice, but no windows or anything like that. Just kind of a leisure kind of like seating. So it's neat.
How were the crowds at games?
They were pretty good. They weren't sold out, but they had a pretty good crowd, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of kids, a lot of family members, until the last game. A buddy of mine was in charge of PR, and they hired a stripper to come in. The stripper came in and started doing her number, and there were a lot of kids, and I think that the PR friend kind of heard a earful after that because of having a stripper at the game, but it was funny. Looking back now, it was funny. But the Crossfire games were a lot of fun, and it was a great game. It really was. Got to broadcast the game up in Rochester against a team called the Nighthawks, and I traveled a little bit with them, so it was a good time. Something unique.
Any particular arenas that stand out to you when you did go on the road?
In terms of the Crossfire, not really. Not really. More so in football, some unique places. But the Crossfire stadiums, like up in Rochester, was just a little dingy stadium, and nothing really that stood out in my mind about it. But some of the places we've been, like Penn University, when Duquesne played out of Penn, we were in the midst of this stadium, in the guts of the stadium, and they put us there, and there was nobody else around, just girders, and they ran a phone line out to us, and I got some good stadium stories.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to those. Now, talking about your time, so how did the opportunity first come about for you to broadcast Duquesne football in 1995?
Yeah, 95, I went to Brian Caleri, who was the athletic director down at Duquesne, and this is after I'd been, having success with North Hills and before Nauticom began. And I went down, and I asked him, I said, Mr. Caleri, would you be interested in having the games on the radio? He said, sure, and he said, sure. I said, okay, well, I'll take care of it. So I pretty much went out, again, sold the advertising, bought the time off the stations, paid everybody that helped me out. And it was just my own production, and really didn't receive any money from the school for the first couple of years. It was more something I just did. But success, they were happy with it. And a lot of people tuned in that otherwise couldn't make it to the games. And we used, I don't know how many different stations over the years, because there was, when we first started doing it, it wasn't online. It was just radio. So we had to always find different radio stations to be willing to put on football. We did it at WKPA out in New Kensington for a while, WPIT, a number of stations. But so Brian Caleri was on board, and we started broadcasting, and it was very successful, and it just continued and haven't stopped since.
Yeah, and we'll take a little break of your time with Duquesne football, because I'm curious about your time broadcasting Duquesne women's basketball.
Oh, sure.
You first started calling Duquesne women's basketball in 1996. So how were you able to expand the calling Duke ladies basketball as well?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a funny story, because after the success of the first year, everybody was happy with the football coverage. So they came to me and said, well, there's a donor who wants to put some of these games on the radio. And they said, well, have you ever done basketball? I said, well, not really. They said, would you mind doing basketball? I said, no, sure, I'll give it a try. So I went up and just there weren't that many games at that point. There were a handful of games that we broadcast on the radio on WPIT, and I had Ryan Gavitor to help me, and he was working at Duquesne at the time as the SID. And so we started back then, and Corey Helenia was playing, one of the best Duquesne players ever. She is up in the rafters in the Hall of Fame, and it was just a special time. There was a learning curve trying to get ready to learn. I mean, I knew basketball, but never called it before, and I really enjoy it. I mean, women's basketball to me over the years that I've been doing it has really grown on me as a kind of a favorite. I've done men also, and I love football, but something about ladies hoops that I really enjoy. Just the strategy, the play, the style of play. It's really a lot of fun. So I've been doing that since '96 and seen Susie McConnell-Serio and now with Dan Burt and success of Meg McConnell this year and in that team and what she's done, getting signed in the WNBA. I believe she's out there kind of looking around. But just to be a part of the dynamics of that program has really been a blessing to me, along with the football. It's taken me to different places to broadcast different events. And I don't travel with them now on the road that much, but I have done games on the road. Used to go down and do the A10 tournament in Richmond and so forth. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that was actually my next question, Alex, with the growth of women's college basketball. What has it been like for you seeing firsthand the growth of what NCAA Division One women's college basketball has grown into what it has become today? Obviously with it exploding over the past few years because of Caitlin Clark.
Caitlin Clark is the key, I think. I mean, she is phenomenal. And, it's a shame to see the abuse she's taking on the court these days. But there's a lot of, she is so successful that she's got a big X on her back. I mean, players want to show her up, but she is tough. And she has done for women's basketball. I don't know anybody that's done more in a long time. I mean, Susie did a lot, McConnell-Serio locally, and Meg McConnell's going to do a lot. But no, Caitlin Clark is just on a level all of her own. So, it's just neat over the last couple of years to see how far women's basketball now being on national TV and being shown where it never used to be shown. And when we used to show up to do basketball games back in the beginning, there was very few fans there. But now it's starting to change, and now the Cooper Fieldhouse now is really getting good crowds for women's basketball. And it's good to see, and it's about time because really they play an outstanding brand of basketball. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it really is.
Yes, it definitely is a lot of fun. Do any particular games stand out with a lot of those postseason runs that Duquesne was able to get? And did you travel with the team during that NCAA tournament in 2016 and the WNIT appearances as well?
We've traveled with the WNIT. When they went to the dance, we did not get to go up to that, but I did watch that on TV, and that's where they played. They won their first game, and then they ran into UConn and got slapped around. But they did have the lead early in that game. I was watching. I'm like, hey, listen, you never know. But they had the early lead. That was fun to watch that. The WNIT games were a lot of fun to broadcast. This past year against Lakewood was an outstanding game to call, and that's where Duquesne won in the last second shot, to pull that. That was an exciting game, But a lot of games with Meg McConnell and Journey Kiyaku and all those players this year was just so much fun. The team never gave up. They did well to get into the WNIT and look forward to next year. It's going to be a new complexion next year. A lot of new kids coming in. You have some of the older players that are still there, but it's going to be a new bunch. And another McConnell steps into the fold, Kelly, and we'll see what she can do. But Dan Burt's got his work cut out for them, but he's always done a great job.
What was that like for you? That was my next question about that buzzer beater against Longwood.
Yeah.
How was that like for you getting the call of that game? Because that made it on SportsCenter. Yeah. I believe it was number one.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. It's one of those things, you make the call and you get excited. And you're like, well, did I make the call right, or did I yell too much? But I felt that the energy, it justified it. It was an exciting call. And I work with Rachel Zimmerman, who does a great job. And, she's right there. And, yeah, it's good. You go back, and I also heard it on the fan the next morning, and it's just kind of cool, I think anytime anybody gets their call replayed anywhere, whether they think it was their best call or not, it was the moment. And the moment, it was exciting. And, yeah, it was a fun one. I enjoyed it, Go back and listen. You're like, man, I was so fortunate to be able to call that, and see it. But, yeah, that was good.
And you can't really talk about basketball in Pittsburgh in general without talking about the royal family in college
Oh,
basketball
sure,
with the McConnells. So, like you had a chance, you got to see so many McConnells, including Susie in her
sure.
time at Duquesne. And, with the McConnell family really getting into that national spotlight this year because of
Yeah.
the success that TJ had in the NBA
Oh my
finals with the
gosh.
Pacers. What is that like for you getting a chance to see so many McConnells come through Duquesne and just in general over their decades of dominance with basketball in this
I'm
city?
glad they had a connection with Duquesne. I mean, that was great. The connection with Duquesne, the McConnells are very, they were very committed. TJ came here for a while before leaving, and, he was just you could tell the guy was good. And, when he left, you hated to see him leave, but you knew that he was going on to some bigger opportunities. And look what he's done now in the or in the NBA, and this year just coming so close. But it's so neat to see the connection between he and Meg. How they would always support each other, and Meg would be wearing his jersey, he'd be wearing Meg's jersey, and to know Susie over the years, and she was just a joy to work with too, and getting to go on the road and interview and talk to them, and all the McConnells have been great. I don't know any of them extremely well, but just dealing with them in the work at Duquesne, it's been a pleasure. And yeah, I'm glad they all came to Duquesne so I can get to see them.
And one thing that is very unique about college basketball in this city is the play by play side of it, because in all of NCAA college basketball, there are two guys who have been broadcasting for the respective schools since the mid 60s, and they're the longest tenure
Mm-hmm.
guys with college basketball. You got Bill Hillgrove, who has been the voice of Pitt basketball since
Right?
1969.
Sure.
And then there is some guy who is ahead of him by 1 year, and that is, of course, Ray Goss, who has been
Ray,
broadcasting
Ray, my
Duquesne
man.
who has been broadcasting Duquesne men's basketball since I
Yeah.
believe year number one was
Yeah.
1968. So what are some of the most valuable lessons with your friendship with Ray, Alex, that you have learned over the years with him?
Ray and I have worked together in a lot of different ways. When I streamed all the Duquesne games out of the garage here, Ray would be on the other side because the games weren't always on radio. Sometimes he would be at a tournament in an island or down in the Caribbean, and they would still stream them through Red Zone Media. So Ray was always fun to get on the phone, and we would have that connection where I'd talk to him, and he would we'd know each other in this capacity through internet streaming. I was the boss back here. Ray was the boss of the court, so we talk back and forth. And Ray is he's just a fun guy. He's got so much history. He wrote a book too, and about his adventures. I think it's called Misadventures in Broadcasting by Ray Goss. But Ray's been just very helpful over the years, and we've had a really good relationship. And he's getting his dues, as he well should. I don't know how old the gentleman is now, but he's been broadcasting forever. It's just been a pleasure to know him. I haven't really got to work with him one-on-one much, every once in a while. But he did fill in for me once when I was in the hospital doing football. He worked with some of the guys, but Ray's been a great person to know down there. Yeah.
Yeah, and then moving back to your time broadcasting Duke's football, what were those early years like calling Duquesne football, knowing the program was so young at the
Yeah.
Division I level when you started calling their games?
Yeah, they had just moved into the MAC conference, and that is where the success really began outside of club level football. When they moved into the MAC, that was a conference that had some pretty good competition. They had different schools all over the New York area and so forth, and they play at Iona and they play Siena and different schools. We go to St. Peter's in New Jersey and play there. And so most of the venues weren't real big. And so you would jump in a car, drive up to Iona or Siena, and the press boxes are small. They're not the stadium boxes you see today. So some of the places you go, the stadium boxes like at St. Francis, it's called the Pine Bowl. So now they have a nice press box up there, but at that time it almost looked like a tree shack. You'd walk up there, they'd have on the first floor like the concession stand. Then up above, they just set you up on it was like a wooden tree shack, and they just put you in there, plug in, and you would broadcast from there. So it was neat, though. It was neat to see Duquesne start to succeed in the MAC because they just got a control of MAC, and they just ran the table in the MAC until they moved to the NEC. I forget how many championships in a row that they won playing in the MAC football conference, but that helped them grow up. And then when they got to the NEC, that was another step up. But the MAC for a long time, they just completely dominated. And that's where they really started picking up steam to have their success over the years.
Were there any press boxes where you had to like literally like stand with somebody like to the side of you like this because they were so small? And any ones that you had to broadcast the game outside?
Yes, I'll tell you a good story. So we went to a school that used to be in the NEC, but they left. They're called Bryant, and they're out of Rhode Island. So up in Bryant, never a great place to broadcast, but you know, you did with what you had. And one time they put us on the roof and they'd string wire down, and it was raining and we were on the roof. And other times they'd slip us into an ulterior press box. It was really small, and you know, they never had good working Wi-Fi up there. Well, the last time we broadcast, me and my pal, Tad, went up and they were like, well, we really don't have any room in the press box. And we're like, so, okay, so what would you like us to do? So they put us on a little side porch that was outside. It had a little covering over it, but the crowd was like right around us, all around us. And the only way we could broadcast was with a cell phone. So we had to broadcast the cell phone back and forth because they had no way to get out. So that's the most just crazy. Like, you're talking the NEC. This isn't like Little Sisters of the Poor in Pittsburgh. You're talking like NEC football. But yeah, we did a game from the porch on the sideline, from the side of the press box. So that was interesting. One other time we went up to play Siena, and they were playing their games at a baseball field. So they put us in the baseball field, and that was in the corner of the stadium. Say this is the square football field. Our press box was in the corner, home plate. So we had that. Yeah. So we had to actually, they had stands. So I actually brought a lot of telephone wire with me, and I strung it out of the press box across to the stands, and I broadcast in the stands with the fans all around me. And that's how I broadcast that game. So there's been some weird broadcasting. Again, talk about Woodland Hills and running there's always stories. I mean, you know, now these days with the internet, it's not so bad.
I'm sure that you had a lot of experience, though, with all those times at Duquesne, knowing that you did have to do a lot of those things with having the broadcast at crazy places at all the high school stadiums around here.
Oh, the high school stadiums around here were, you know, it was quite the experience over the years, you know, putting phone lines in everywhere. And finally schools started getting a little more savvy and technical, and things like that don't matter anymore. But at that early point in the career when you're broadcasting, those are the things you faced, and you know, challenges.
And as a broadcaster, Alex, what has it been like building those relationships with every player that comes through the Duquesne door every season, knowing that, you know, it's part of your job, you know, to tell those stories on the air with each game?
Yeah, the players are great. You know, it's been really great since we traveled with the team. And when I say travel, I don't mean just jump on a commercial flight and meet the team at the destination. The best ways you get to know these players is, first off, going to practice, which I've been doing this year, and secondly, traveling with them. You know, you travel with these guys, get on a charter, you meet up at the hotel, just get to talk and shoot the breeze and get to know them. And a lot of times the players, when you get together at breakfast or whatever, they'll sit by themselves, or they'll be with tutors, or they'll be talking to the coaches. But it's always good just to kind of make contact and find out where they're from or what they enjoy, and even meet the parents at the hotels that you stay at and hear stories about them from their parents and what they like to do or what they like to eat or what their hobbies are. So that's been happening the last few years. It's a lot of fun, man, because you get to know these people. It's, you know, to go up and know a number and not know a name or a face or anything about them, it's a little harder, but it gets more personal when you start talking to all these places or all these folks, including the coaches, which has not always been the case with me, because I've always been so busy and doing so many jobs, I didn't always have the time. But now that Duquesne is the focus of what I do, there's a lot more time to go down and talk to these people and the players and get to know them a little bit.
And what has that been like for you, building that relationship with Coach Schmidt as well, knowing that he's been the head coach of the program so long, you know, and he was with the program when you started broadcasting games as an assistant?
Yeah, he is. He's been something else. He was there when I first started broadcasting, and Greg Gattuso was the head coach there at Duquesne. And Greg was a great guy to watch. He was like a caged lion on the sidelines, and He was a lot of fun to be with. I got a funny story if you want to hear it.
Oh, yes, absolutely, Alex.
Mark Madden knows this story because Mark Madden was involved in this story. So I was up broadcasting the game at Duquesne, and I was talking to my partner, and it was Mark Madden who just stopped up after the game, and Greg Gattuso was also in the press box at the time being interviewed by one of the Post-Gazette writers. Well, Duquesne had lost the game, and that was some bad play by the quarterback. And so while Gattuso was across the press box talking to the reporter, he was looking over at us, and Madden was saying, well, the quarterback choked. And was kind of going like this, like he choked, and it was a bad ending, and they blew it. And Gattuso, you could see Gattuso looking from across, just getting more and more mad. And I was sitting there looking at Gattuso, seeing him watch Madden, going, this ain't going to end well. So after the break, Gattuso got done on his interview. We went to commercial break. Right before that, Gattuso walked over, yelling at Madden, you don't know what you're talking about. And he left. And so I'm sitting there stunned going, the coach just yelled at me and the Mark Madden, and all Madden had to say to me is he looked at me and goes, made for good radio. I'm like, oh my gosh. But that was funny. It was just crazy. Madden never is I like Mark. I used to put Mark on the air when he was a Post-Gazette writer and we were North Hills football. Mm-hmm. He'd come and hang out and we'd interview him at halftime, but he was always a funny guy.
Indeed, and you've had a chance to call all 4 of Duquesne's FCS playoff games, mm-hmm. including their win in the first round of the FCS tournament against Townsend in 2018. So, any memories pop off from any of those games during the FCS tournament?
That was a brutal game. I mean, the weather was just horrendous. I remember making the way down there, and it was an exciting game, and we had a pretty good vantage point, but all we could see is just how's this team going to fight this weather, let alone the team in the first half. They just came out in the second half and just took it away, and it was really exciting. And that moved them on to play, South Dakota, and that was, you're playing the top team, one of the top teams in the nation. So we went out there, and it was a rough game, but just a chance to make it past that first round in the FCS playoffs was just, phenomenal. First time that team had done it, so it was great. Another game that we did that was also great, Duquesne played William and Mary in the FCS playoffs down in Lynchburg, down that way. And that was a track meet. I think it was like 56-49. It was just a tremendous game. So some of the games they played in the FCS have just been really unbelievable, and it's been a lot of fun. So
what was that experience like for you going to South Dakota State?
South Dakota State was interesting. We got there, and there was, we took a bus, and it's out in the middle of basically nowhere. There's not a whole lot around in the Dakotas. So we made our way out to the city and broadcast the game, and halfway through the game a blizzard started, and it started covering up the field to the point where they had to bring out the sweepers, and they came out and were cleaning it as they were playing. They were cleaning off the field, and South Dakota State was the real deal. But it was a pleasure to go out and see them, and I guess we had to hurry up after the game and get back to the airport and get out of town before the bad weather hit. But that was an experience too, just to see that program.
Yeah, and another notable game in the history of Duquesne football was their win in 2021 in Athens against Ohio University. So
that was one game we did not get to go to.
Oh, really?
That was a COVID year, and during that year, things were very touch and go on who goes, who doesn't go, and because of that, it kind of was a little bit sad after seeing us come out with the win. But that's one of those games you really wanted to go to. But COVID really did mess up a lot of plans and some broadcasting, but it is what it was. And, a lot of times we would actually do broadcasting from inside at that time, the Palumbo Center, because we just didn't travel with the team. And they did that with basketball too. So that's one thing that kind of stopped us from broadcasting that game.
What was that experience like broadcasting during COVID when you weren't allowed to travel?
A little difficult because you rely on the camera work to be able to call play. And a funny thing, Tim Benz did one of the games I was on vacation, and so Tim filled in, did the play-by-play. So he was up in the Palumbo Center watching the game on TV. They were playing LIU, and Tim was doing the game, and Tad was with them. And so there was one play where the camera work was terrible because they have students doing the camera work, and sometimes the students aren't quick to adjust or quick to. So Tim was making a call, and he said, he was watching the TV up in the Palumbo, and quarterback goes back, make the pass, throws it in towards the end zone. The camera never moved. But Tim's like, he made the call that it was a touchdown. So sure enough, Tim's like, they showed the play and it was a touchdown. So Tim's like, oh, thank God I made the right call. But yeah, it was tough. Sometimes you can't see numbers also because the camera's so far away. And that's one of the issue in some of these schools, man, that, depending on the color of the numbers or depending on where you're at, it's really hard to see. But when you're doing it off TV, it's next to impossible to make a really good call because there's so much you miss. It's so much you miss. But that was an experience. All the broadcasters, I'm sure Mr. Hillgrove did that. I know Chris Shovelin did that too. You just go into a studio, have a big TV, and make calls.
Yeah, and what was that experience like, though, just watching Duquesne defeat Ohio U, knowing that it was the only win that the Dukes have had against an FBS school?
That was incredible. I mean, that was just amazing that the team did what they did. Darius Parentes came in and really made a big splash in that game, pulled it out to a win. And, boy, I'll tell you what, that's after they had played, I believe that's the year after they played TCU. I believe. I'll have to go back and check on that. But they came out, and that was in Athens. And, I remember just sitting in a restaurant watching it on TV, just going, this would be incredible, for the program. And Duquesne's done those things over the years to step up the program and to beat an FBS school. I mean, I don't care who it is. That's impressive for the program, and that helps recruiting. In games like this against Pitt, games at Florida State, West Virginia, Coastal Carolina, TCU, Ohio. Anytime you play up like that, it's going to help the program. And that's definitely helped Duquesne expand their resume and, put them on a list now for some schools that want to play them. Maybe Pitt will play us again. Who knows who's going to call next, but Army may be on the schedule. I think Oregon State's on the road. So Duquesne's really coming into their own.
And, one thing that, doing my research for this interview that I was really jealous about was one of those FBS teams you got to play. You had to have 2 trips to Hawaii. So what were those experiences like? Pretty much getting a free trip to Hawaii, because that's something that is really so rare.
Well, to be honest, we didn't think they were going to take us to Hawaii because they had played there a few years previous and we didn't go. And, the reasoning, they said, well, the game isn't going to really take place until in Pittsburgh. It'll be midnight. So, radio, do we want to have, it's going to be on TV. Do we need radio? Well, this past trip, they're like, you know what? We want radio too. So we got to go. Oh my gosh, that was just an amazing trip. We got on this jumbo jet with all the players, and I got stuck next to a window. I had 2 big linemen next to me. So it's kind of a neat trip. But I got to know a lot of the guys and just some of the things we got to do while we were there. We got to see Pearl Harbor. We went up to Diamond Head, and we took a hike up there to the top. And that almost killed me, but I made it up and back. And it was just a pleasure to be on Waikiki Beach and then, hang out with the team and watch them practice and, go different places with them. And the field they played at wasn't the original, stadium they had in Honolulu, which they played the Pro Bowl in many years.
Aloha Stadium.
Yeah, Aloha Stadium. So they played at the Hawaii, the actual field, which was much smaller. But the crowd was, it fit quite nice in that little stadium. And it was an odd place, again, where they had us on one side of the field. And to see the other side, we're thankful we had a monitor. But played a good game, just couldn't pull it out. But it was neat to be there and see the culture. And, of course, they hand you papaya at halftime. And I think Spam is the big deal in Hawaii, too. So they'd bring up Spam and stuff. But it was a neat cultural thing and just neat to go out and experience that. But that was a blessing, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Did you guys get a direct flight from Pittsburgh to Honolulu?
No. The first trip out, we flew to Chicago and Chicago to Honolulu. And on the way back from Honolulu to Colorado, Denver, and then from Denver to Pittsburgh. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were long trips. But it was, that was basically a week, I want to say vacation, but outside of doing work, looking up team information and studying and do that type of thing, it was a week really just of to kind of see a place that you'd never see otherwise. Like I would never go to Hawaii otherwise that I know of, but to be able to go because of that was just, totally, things like that make it worth it. Over the years, it's never been a huge moneymaker for me. We do well, but I have a full-time job in the day and outside of when I ran Nauticom and so forth. So, things like that are just special. So it was a good time. Yeah.
And you've had a chance to broadcast at a lot of other neat stadiums. When You guys went down to Tallahassee to
Oh,
play Florida State, going up to Boston recently to play Boston College. So, any favorite arenas on the road that you've had the chance to broadcast during your time as the play-by-play announcer for Duke's football?
yeah, it's Tallahassee was great because we got a most places you go, the bigger colleges like Boston College or Tallahassee or West Virginia, when you show up on the bus, they give you a police escort. It's great because you get to go through stoplights, everything. Everybody, all the fans are outside the bus, flipping you off or whatever because they know you're the opposing team. But it's just a great atmosphere. When we were in Tallahassee, the players loved it, man. We were sitting there and, you know, Tallahassee was just a fun trip and the fans had a good time. And, you know, just the experience. It was the game you thought it would be. Tallahassee ran over it, but we held our ground like we did at WVU. I mean, we held our ground quite well down there in the first half, and then second half after that 2-hour rain delay. Then West Virginia came back and beat us, but we were in the game for a while, and that's always fun to see. And that's what you hope when you play those schools. Like that's what we hope whenever we go down and play Pitt. We're going to be able to keep it, respectable. What can we do? You never know. That's why they play the game, right? You never know. But those stadiums were great. West Virginia was great, except you're up in the nosebleed seats, and that's kind of tough.
Yeah, I remember watching that West Virginia game. That was 2 years ago in
Yeah.
2023. And to talk about the experience with that game, because I remember watching it and it was just rain delay, rain delay, we're in a rain delay, we're in a rain delay. So it just seemed that just had to be a crazy game knowing that the Dukes were in it,
Yeah.
when that rain delay happened.
Well, at that point, you don't want a rain delay because the team is doing so well. So we were hopeful that they'd keep playing, but then, it wasn't the rain, it was the lightning. And finally, the lightning came. And after lightning strike, I think they have to wait a half hour at least before they can resume play. So every time we get close to a half hour, another lightning strike, and they'd have to keep delaying it. So, it was frustrating because I think for the team, it was frustrating too, because when you're playing that well and you seem to just get off that spark early and jump on West Virginia and get the early scores and so forth. You think that if the game stays as it is, that it could be kind of an interesting ending. But I think everybody kind of had the thought after they went into the locker room at halftime. There's always going to be kind of a letdown a little bit because you tighten up, you cramp up, you're not warmed up, and no matter what, you go back out and the game just wasn't the same after that. But I had to say I was very impressed with what Duquesne did early and how proud they made the university. I mean, I talked to Ken Gormley at halftime, the president of Duquesne, and he was proud. A lot of the folks that made the trip down was proud. And so, yeah, we hope that we can measure up and do something similar to Pitt and make it respectable.
Yeah, I was
I know you're a Pitt
into
guy.
my next question.
Yeah,
Into my next question, the big one coming up in just a week as Pitt and Duquesne are going to be meeting in football
Yeah.
for the first time since 1939. So,
crazy, right?
how does it feel, Alex, knowing that you're going to be a part of this historic game 86 years in the making?
Well, it means a lot. And I told Tim, my partner, and Josh and Tad before that, it's a big game for me because, I've been broadcasting in these little press boxes all over. When I first started doing the game football, they were in the little press boxes and they were in little crowds. And, to grow up to where this program is now, to play Pitt in Florida State, to me, it's something I would never have imagined, 31 years ago. You never imagined that. You think, well, we'll play our divisions, our NEC or MAC games, but it's going to be an exciting game because, it's like surreal. It's surreal, and to be part of it is a big honor. And just everybody that's helped me along the way, and the people at Duquesne, and it's going to be surreal. It's surreal right now. It seemed like 6 months ago. Well, I got plenty of time, and you snap your fingers, and here we are a week before the game, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's here already. But Pitt won that, or Duquesne won that last game, 21-14, and they've had a couple good games. Now that's back when Pitt was playing on the national level. They were D1. People don't realize that back in those days when Elmer Layden was the coach and Duquesne had quite the program. Elmer Layden, one of the four horsemen, who came from Notre Dame and did a great job here, and there were a lot of great players and a lot of history with Duquesne and Pitt and Duquesne and other schools. And so Duquesne at that time was a national power, and they won the first ever Orange Bowl. At that time it was called Festival of Palms Bowl. But then they played some good teams back then, Mississippi State and a few others. And yeah, they were on the national level. So right now, they're not. They're in the FCS. But coming back to play Pitt, it's just really cool after 86 years.
How do you think the Dukes are going to square up against the Panthers with Eli Holstein returning for Pitt? Curious to see how the game's going to play out.
Well, Holstein and Reed, the running back, really provided a jump to them last year. And when Holstein got knocked out, it kind of hurt Pitt a little bit. So he's back. He's only a sophomore this year. And I watched him last year play. He's the real deal. So we'll see how well he does for Duquesne. And they got, they have some holes they have to fill, but they got some great linebackers. They're going to be a tough team. For Duquesne, we have a lot of older men back that have been playing at Duquesne. The COVID situation helped a lot of these players at Duquesne, like Ackerman, the defensive lineman, and also a couple others that have an extra year eligibility because of COVID. So A.J. Ackerman is back. A few others. We have 3 linemen back, 3 defensive linemen back, some of the secondary back. We have a journeyman coming in, a quarterback that's in his 7th year. Came out of Gardner Webb. His name is Jim Riddell, or actually Tyler Riddell. He came from Gardner Webb. He played 5 years before that with Eastern Tennessee State University, where he threw for over 5,000 yards, 71 touchdowns. He came from Tampa, Florida. Watched him throw. He's got a good throw, good ball. He looks good. He's going to have good protection in the backfield. We have a good Taj Butts running back that's just amazing. Sean Solomon, another solid back in the backfield. So we also have a lot of good transfers on defense. Defense is very solid for Duquesne this year. Now, the only thing about the Pitt game that I think I worry about, and I think a lot of fans worry about, is you want to get out of that game unscathed. Because Pitt's great. It's an awesome game. It's going to be a pleasure to play that team. But you need to get out, and you got the rest of the year to go. So you don't want to have anybody really important knocked out. And that's happened a few times for Duquesne over the past couple of years where they play those big teams. They'd lose key players. So, hopefully this year they're going to get out of there unscathed.
And this is also going to be your first time broadcasting a game at Acrisure Stadium. So I'm sure you're excited about that.
It makes me a little nervous. They tell me the press box is down in the corner of the end zone. So with my eyes the way they are, they're not so great. So it'll be a little bit of a challenge, but they have a monitor, and I'll do the best I can, especially when they're on our side of the 50, no problem. When they're down the other way, it can be a challenge, but we'll make do, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't even imagine the excitement down there, because I think they have a Rib Fest going on that day, and they have some bands that are going to play, and I'm curious to see how many fans show up. A lot of fans from Duquesne and Pitt, obviously. So it should be a good day, a lot of fun.
Yeah. Indeed, and I believe the Savannah Bananas are also going to be a PNC.
Are they really?
I believe they are.
I thought that was a one-time thing. They were just here not too long ago, weren't they?
I think they're their first appearance here is this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, tickets sold out right away for that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I saw them on what are they, TikTok thing?
Yes, yeah. They build an empire because of social media.
Well, you'll be down there. That'll be fun. It's gonna be a good
I
time.
can't wait. It's gonna be so. I cannot wait. And knowing that it's your first time at Acrisure Stadium broadcasting again, you did have a chance to also broadcast some games at Three Rivers Stadium.
Yeah.
So any favorite memories pop up during your time calling games at Three Rivers?
Well, we did a lot of the Quad A championship game over the years, and North Hills games over the years, and just so many high school games. We'd go down sometimes and broadcast all 4. You'd put them on radio back in the day and put them online too. And that's when Don Rebel was working with me, and we were running the Nauticom Sports Network, and we'd make a big day of it. Just go down, and we had so many announcers that took part, and it was the early stages again of what we were doing at Nauticom, and there were so many great games down there. Some great games with Upper St. Clair, Mount Lebanon, North Hills, NA. And that's been so many years ago since I've done high school. A lot of those games bleed into one another, but just a good time.
And what are some of the main difference for you, Alex, calling sports on radio compared to TV?
Well, TV, and this is one thing that radio is a lot. I enjoy radio more just because people depend on description, and it's theater of the mind. And I think a lot of people like that. Like when I used to travel overnights or coming back from Duquesne games, I love to listen. Like I like to turn on Penn State and listen to radio games because they were more descriptive and it was like a story being told and you used your imagination. I enjoy that. And you have to give more detail, more description. Announcing, I think, plays a bigger role in radio sports. When you get to TV, you don't have to be so descriptive because everybody can see, obviously, the game. Like when we're doing women's basketball or football, you don't have to do play by play quite so tightly. You can be a little loose and let the pictures speak for themselves. So you can be a little more laid backish on that. But yeah, I love radio. It's just a challenge to describe the game and make the person listening feel that they're at the game. So that's great. But there is a definite, difference between the two. But yeah, radio is where I was, where I was raised announcing, and so I'm used to that. So when the ESPN guys came along and we started doing the TV, they would come around and say, "Okay, listen, you're doing fine. Just you don't have to talk as much. Sometimes let the fans say, let people know what's going on, or just let the camera." But it's a fine line. Yeah, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and how has the industry changed in your eyes, Alex, since you started compared to what the sports broadcasting industry has become today?
Well, it's changed in the fact that it only used to be radio. Like you could broadcast if you had a radio station, and so that was always the challenge. When we started Duquesne, we'd have to go sometimes from station to station, but you always needed a station. Well, that changed when the internet came along because you didn't need a station anymore. As a matter of fact, at Nauticom, one of the first things I did was I said, well, listen, if we can't get a radio station to do a game, that doesn't mean we can't do the game. It means you send somebody out there, get a phone line, and you do an internet-only broadcast. And that's one of the first things I tried to do at Nauticom, which is cool because you didn't need a station. So you could send Joe Schmo out to a game as long as there was a phone line out there, he could broadcast. So you didn't have to spend money. You could just do a game basically for free. You pay the announcer and so forth. So that's how it's changed. And now there's so much, I mean, you're in the business these days. You know what the internet's done, streaming is done. It's the Wild West out there. You can go out and pretty much do anything on your own. Like you're a go-getter. You go out and you get your own gigs and your jobs. And, the internet's opened up the door for anybody that wants to be an announcer. They have a platform now. And back in the day, they didn't. They had to, fight to get on radio somewhere. So you're in a very competitive industry right now. And that. And I think everybody out there that's in the business right now knows how competitive it can be.
Yeah, and that's actually perfect to what I was going to ask Ness, Alex. What is your biggest advice for anybody who does have an interest in joining us working in the sports industry?
I'd say do what you're doing. I think you are the model of what to do. Like sometimes you can't depend on others. Whenever I did anything, it was always on my own. And I was proud of that because to start Red Zone or to start, going to Nauticom and getting that started at Scholastic Sport, anything I did was on my own. And I was successful because of that. Now, if I had to depend on other people, would I have been? I don't know. But all I know is I was pretty much my own boss for all the years. And you're doing that now. But, people are going to start seeing you're a go-getter. And that's probably going to lead you to a lot of things that are to come for you. And I'd say you're the model. Just go out, find something you like to do it. Whatever it takes. And with your show and all the broadcasts you do, which is a lot because I see them all over social media, that's perfect. What can I tell you? I think that you're a good model.
Thank you so much, Alex. That means so much to me, my friend.
Mm.
And one more question for you, Alex. If you can pinpoint any moment during your time calling high school sports, calling Duquesne football and women's basketball, what is your favorite memory as a sports broadcaster working in the sports industry? I know it's a loaded question for everything, all the phenomenal things that you have done during your career.
Probably the most exciting game I can remember, and it's been a while, is North Hills went up and played in Altoona for a state championship game. And that was against Central Bucks West. And that was LeVar Arrington and Eric Kasparovich was playing. Well, they mounted a comeback and won the game late in the game. And I just remember being so excited because it was such a big deal for a team to win a state championship with those players that were on those teams, LeVar Arrington and again, Eric Kasparovich. It was just a fantastic finish. A lot of exciting. I'd say one of the other most exciting Duquesne games I called was Duquesne going down and playing William and Mary. It was just a phenomenal game. We lost, but it was a lot of fun, scoring left and right. I mean, any game like that you love, you know. You can go into those bummer games sometimes where it's just monotonous. But those are a couple of the games that really stand out in my mind over the 31 years of broadcasting. You know, there's been a lot, and but I would say those two really stand out.
Alex, this has been such a phenomenal episode. Thank you so much for coming on. You have meant so much to me in my career. I'm so honored to call you a friend.
You.
Thank you so much for coming on, Alex.
Thank you, Colton. It's been a pleasure, and I hope I answered most of the questions that you had, and it was a pleasure to do it, and I'm honored. So thank you and good luck. Colton,
thank you, Alex. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.